Hello, and welcome to our weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche. She is the founder and chairwoman of the Schiller Institute. Today is August 14th, 2024, and I'm Harley Schlanger, and I'll be your host. You can send your questions and comments for Helga via email to questions@schillerinstitute.org or post them on the chat page. Well, Helga, our title today is Reason, Not Weapons. And it takes us directly to the question of how to apply reason to change the dangerous direction that's been chosen by Western governments on numerous fronts. We have a series of questions that came in on the invasion of Ukrainian forces into the Kursk region of Russia. There are reports that there were mercenaries from Poland, the United Kingdom, and France. And this has prompted a number of analysts to say that this has crossed a red line. You described this attack and the Ukraine drone attack on the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant as, quote, a new phase in Western plans of the destruction of Russia, unquote. So here are a couple of the questions for you. Do you think these attacks are a sign of the desperation of Ukraine, the US, and Nato? Do you think that they're designed to create a better bargaining position for Zelensky at future negotiations? Or do you think it's a declaration of all-out war on Russia?
Well, I'm worried that it may be the latter, because what we have seen is really step by step an escalation, and the idea that, I can only quote certain top analysts who have made the point that while the Russians are clearly moving ahead massively in the Donbas region, and the Ukrainian troops are losing there, according to reports, 1,000 people a day that's killed and wounded. And these troops are very badly trained. Some of them just a few days, and then they're being sent to the battleground, terrible situation. But then this brigade, which attacked the Kursk region, supposedly is an excellent trained brigade on the level of NATO weapons, NATO training. And obviously, they have been able to make quite some progress, limited, but nevertheless. So, I think that the underlying motive is still, escalation to draw, Russia into a general war, because, I cannot see any logic. If you wanted to have a settlement, you could have had that in March 22. So I think when the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Ryabkov said that the situation is such that there are no circuit breakers anymore, I think that is much more to the point, because it seems to go on. And I think we are quickly reaching the point of no return. I think we are in a very, very dangerous escalation in the two war fronts around Ukraine, but also Southwest Asia. And that's why, we have been making a real effort to try to, get a different level into the whole debate, with the discussion of a new security and development architecture, with the idea of trying to get some other voice in the picture, because right now I think we are headed for a complete catastrophe.
Well, and we should call on people to participate in the International Peace Coalition, which had an extraordinarily successful call last week in terms of the participants and the power of the presentation. So that's every Friday, and people should join that and become a part of that. You mentioned the Southwest Asia situation. We have a question from someone who identifies herself as a Palestinian who is a grandmother of many children who still live in Gaza. And she said, is there any chance the hostage release and ceasefire talks in Doha will succeed? Why would anyone expect Netanyahu to suddenly accept a ceasefire and a Palestinian state? Is there anyone who has any leverage that can change the situation inside Israel?
Well, clearly, the only force which could have a leverage is the United States and the Biden administration. However, if you look at what they're doing, not only are they continuously supplying Israel with weapons, they just concluded another deal which will not go into effect right away because these are weapon systems, all kinds of fighter jets and other vehicles, which clearly take years for production, but it's a deal of 20 billion the State Department just concluded with Israel, which even if it doesn't affect the situation immediately, it sends a horrible signal. I mean, the opposite would be needed, basically that the United States says, look, stop now, have a ceasefire and all the other demands, but that I don't see coming. What you see instead is a continuous buildup of U.S. weapon systems in the region, U.S. aircraft carriers, U.S. submarines, all kinds of fleets accompanying these formations. So I think that from the side of the United States, they clearly send out the signal, what Austin had said from the very beginning, that if Israel is attacked, the United States will stand firmly by the side of Israel, which, given the unbelievable reception Netanyahu got in the United States in the Congress with 58 standing ovations, he can only read as a signal to completely go ahead. So, I think that the present situation seems to be very, very stuck. I think the only sign of hope is that Abbas from the Palestinian Authority was just in Moscow. I think he still is in Moscow. He met with President Putin yesterday, and there it was agreed that Palestinians will be in a special role participating in the BRICS meeting in Kazan in October, and that there will be a forum created in the sidelines of the BRICS for all nations to participate, to discuss and express their views on the situation in Gaza. Now that is, in a sentence, a parallel event to what the resolution of Chandra Mustafa, the head of the Just organizations from Malaysia, is promoting. That is the Uniting for Peace resolution of the UN 377, which provides that if the UN Security Council is stuck on a certain issue because of the veto of one member or some other reason, then there is the provision that the entire issue can go to the UN General Assembly. And I think many peace organizations, including the International Peace Coalition, are supporting this idea. And I think that such an extraordinary step may be the last resort, that you bring the entire issue to the UN General Assembly so that the eyes of the world will be directed towards it, and it cannot be, covered up by whatever media control. So I think the situation is not hopeful. I think, I think Hamas already said that they will not participate in the meeting on the 15th in Qatar or Egypt. And, I think that therefore this idea of going to the UN General Assembly may be the only way to move this forward.
You're listening to Helga Zepp-LaRouche from the Schiller Institute. She has time to take your questions today, so send them to us at questions@schillerinstitute.org. Someone did ask a question about what about the 377 motion, so you answered that. But here's a question going back to Ukraine from Deborah Jennings, who said, does Helga have any idea of who will be selected to replace Zelensky?
Well, I don't know, but there was yesterday a report by the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service that they claim that the United States and the West in general have decided to remove President Zelensky and replace him with the former interior minister, who was interior minister of Ukraine from 14 to 21. And, if that would be the case, one would have to really look at it very carefully, because he is reported, this is all this Russian source, so I think that needs to be obviously counter-checked. But he seems to be one of the founders of the Azov battalion. He clearly has links to the Mirotvorets list. And, in general, he seems to be in the vicinity of the Victoria Nuland networks, which include the present US ambassador to Kiev. So, I think that if that turns out to be true, it does not forebode anything good.
Here's a question from a contact in Germany who sent in the following. With the obsessive coverage of the Olympics, we are hearing little about the political crisis in France. And she writes, does Macron intend to run things without a prime minister? Are you expecting France to remain calm, or is there a possibility of a blow-up there?
Well, I think the fact that there are now reports that already foreign mercenaries from several countries, including France, so reportedly are already in Ukraine, would confirm what Macron had mentioned a couple of months ago, namely to send French and other NATO troops into Ukraine, which, it's very hard to say when the final red line is crossed. The problem is that the West, every time Russia is not reacting, they become completely manic and say, see, there are no red lines, Putin is just bluffing. But I think this is really incredibly stupid, because, I would give it a different interpretation, namely that Putin shows an enormous patience, basically because, I think the Russians are aware, like everybody in the West who is reasonable, that, an escalation can only lead to a tragedy. But it's almost like an obsession by the West to keep escalating. And, it's not just France which will blow up, I'm sure, because there's nothing in the French situation which, gives hope for stability. The same situation, obviously, is in Germany, where this past Monday, the Presidium of the Social Democracy decided to fully back Scholz and the decision to install American medium-range, possibly long-range missiles in Germany. As Scholz had said when he came back from the NATO summit, that the United States made the decision to put these long-range missiles into Germany, and that was a good decision. So Scholz admitted that it was not Germany which made the decision, but it was the United States. Where is German sovereignty? Germany has become the laughingstock in the whole world, that they don't have a government of their own, but they have somebody who is, reducing Germany to a vassal state, or the 55th state of the United States, run by some kind of governor of the United States. It is abysmal. And I can only say, we must do everything possible to tell the people that if you install American missiles, with the idea that then they should be, after a certain production period, replaced by European-produced such missiles, this brings us back to the situation as it was in the beginning of the 80s, where you had the Pershing II and SS-20, with the NATO double decision, which reduced the warning time of a potential launch of nuclear weapons to 4 or 5 minutes. At that time, you had millions of people in the streets because they were aware that if there was the slightest mistake, if the one side would have on their radar screen something which looked like a missile from the other side, they had to launch the entire arsenal because the time was just too short to allow for a mistake. Now, at that time, these large mass demonstrations in the streets contributed to, resolving the situation, which was, at that time was the INF treaty. In the meantime, that INF treaty and many other treaties have been cancelled. This was by President Trump. And now you basically, by the beginning of 26, even the New START agreement will run out of existence, and then you will have absolutely no more arms negotiation treaties between NATO and Russia. And therefore, I think what we have found in the organizing, that the young people are completely oblivious and indifferent, and they have no idea. They say, oh yeah, NATO is okay, and they don't know, they have not thought it through. We found on the other side that the elderly in Germany, the people who still either experienced World War II or grew up in the post-war period where the memory of the bombings and the destruction of World War was still very fresh in the minds of people. So we have to somehow succeed in making clear to people what is the effect of these decisions, because I think we have never been so close to the danger of a new war, this time with nuclear weapons. And if it ever comes to that, it would be the end of civilization. So I can only say that I think this decision by the SPD Presidium, I think it's suicidal. I think, I cannot imagine that the SPD base will support that. There are already important people, from the leadership, Mützenich, Stegner, Borjans, former chief of the SPD, who are opposing it. But I think the SPD will get the bill for this decision in the upcoming state election in September. But Germany and France will go into a period of utmost turbulence. That's already clear.
Well, the person who asked that question just sent in a follow-up note saying, "Thank you for your answer. It confirms what we thought. We now know for sure that why Schultz never demanded an explanation for the Nord Stream pipeline. Germany will not defend its sovereign security, and Schultz is a puppet." So that's from the person who asked the question. Let's jump over to the United States for a second, because we have a question from a Texas Republican who said, "In 2016, my friends and I supported Donald Trump because he attacked the New World Order and all of its wars. Now it seems as though he's supporting Israel's war of extermination in Gaza to get support from Israeli Zionists and Christian Zionists in the United States. Do you know why he would change his stance against the war and now be on the same side with Biden?"
Well, I don't know what Trump will do. I still have a tiny hope that once he is president, that, he, given the fact that he is known for erratic decisions, that he may decide, to really end these wars. I mean, I can only say this is a hope. It's not a conviction and not certainty. I think the problem with the US election in general is the influence of AIPAC in deciding local elections for congressmen, for senators, and also presidential candidates with enormous amounts of money is just breathtaking. Fortunately, they just failed to unseat Congresswoman Ilan. I forgot her second name. Maybe you can help. In any case, what that proves is that that the AIPAC, one should probably look where do they get these enormous sums of money, because we are talking about millions and millions of dollars. I mean, what that demonstrates is that the United States is no longer a democracy. I mean, it's a plutocracy. If, what decides elections is sums of, millions, and in some cases, dozens of millions, then, I think it's really democracy itself which is at stake. So I can only say, this is a period like probably never ever existed in history, where I think the electoral process, even in an important electoral system like the presidential system in the United States, is definitely getting at its limits. And the only hope is that ordinary citizens, people, who normally think that they have no big role, they must become state citizens by, in a certain sense, understanding that when the American Revolution happened, the War of Independence, subsequently the Declaration of Independence, people should reread the text of the Declaration of the Independence. That at certain times, that people, don't ask me now to quote it by heart, I don't know, but I know the content very well, that, the Declaration of Independence basically says that, you should never lightheartedly bring down a government or change the order, because, it implies a lot. But after you have endured a miserable condition for a very long time, you have the right and the duty to bring a change. Now, that obligation of the Declaration of Independence is right now what is required. But it does mean that ordinary citizens have to become state citizens. That means they have to quickly qualify themselves to be competent on the decision, what should a president do in terms of foreign policy, economic policy, military policy, cultural policy. Now, I think the United States, as the European countries, will go into a very difficult period, because this is not just a US election, but, we are sitting on the powder keg of the failing financial system. You saw the Black Monday last week, where especially Asian stock markets went down and they popped up the next day. This was, basically due to the yen carry trade, the derivative exposure, and, a collapse of the markets could happen anytime. It could happen even before the US election. Then naturally you have the emergence of a new system in the form of the BRICS that is also underway before the US election. And I can only repeat what I said for a very long time, that the only way how we will get out of this incredibly dangerous moment with the danger of nuclear war is we have to convince the political forces in the West, in the collective West, in Europe, in the United States, that we have to stop trying to treat all these other countries as enemies. Russia, China, the BRICS countries, Brazil, Indonesia, India, Africa. These are not enemies, and we should support their effort to overcome their own underdevelopment. In the case of the Global South, the countries of the Global South for the very first time see the chance to overcome underdevelopment and poverty because of the rise of China, which is not a threat. And I think we have to retool the thinking, and the average citizen have to express people's to people's relation. They should travel, if they can afford it, they should travel to some of these countries or seek a dialogue. But we have to start to stop this geopolitical confrontation, or soon it will be too late. And I'm absolutely certain, and I can only give you a personal guarantee, that if the United States, if Germany, France, Italy would say, okay, we want to participate in the building of a new economic system together with the BRICS on a win-win basis, on the basis of the UN Charter, on the basis of the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, I can give you a 100% assurance the answer would be an overwhelming yes, we welcome you, and that is the way out. So please bring this thought into the discussion. Go to town meetings of congressmen, of any other political event, and just raise that possibility, because we have to get off this repetition of the Cold War on steroids, because that's where we are at right now.
And one of the ways to qualify as a proper citizen of our republic is to subscribe to the Executive Intelligence Review. It's a weekly online publication which takes up these issues that we're discussing today. And in fact, the final question I have for you is from a longtime subscriber who said that he is he's sending this note as the world is entering an economic period which is being described by some as choppy waters. He reports tomorrow is the 53rd anniversary of Nixon's announcement that to protect the dollar, he was suspending the core of the Bretton Woods Agreement. And he writes, your husband, the late Lyndon LaRouche, warned that these actions were a repeat, that Nixon's actions were a repeat of Hjalmar Schacht's economic policies implemented under Hitler, and should be described as fascist and would lead to a breakdown and war. And he said, looking back at the 50-year arc of LaRouche's forecast, I would say that his warnings were justified and played a decisive role in the decision of members of the permanent bureaucracy of the Justice Department to persecute him. I'd like to know what you think, both about his forecast and whether this was one of the major causes of the hostility against him from the establishment.
Well, I think, they attacked my husband, my late husband, at a moment when he just was the producer of ideas, when we had no political organization worth talking about. It was just a philosophical association in 1971. And however, he absolutely, with crystal clear insights and foresight, recognized the inherent flaw of the economic system. And when Nixon did that on the 15th of August 1971, he was the only economist internationally who absolutely on the mark predicted that if you would continue on this line of deregulation, of replacing production with profit maximization, of money makes money, of this whole exuberant system of creating more billionaires and more poor billions of people, that this would lead to a point of new breakdown. And it's so funny, in the recent period, I had several discussions with high-ranking people who at a certain point always would bring up on their own the forecasts of Lyndon LaRouche. And they said, look, it is incredible. Now everything is turning out to be exactly as he prognosed. And it's too bad that he is not around to see, how absolutely truthful his prognosis turned out to be, but also that some of his solutions are now being picked up by so many countries in the global south to implement sound economic policies. And I think that is very true. So, maybe tomorrow on that fateful anniversary, the best our viewers can do is read some of LaRouche's writings. Read, for example, his writing Trade Without Currency. That's on the EIR website, one of the articles up front. You can click on it and just read it and then think, why is the West not just doing the same thing, working together with the countries of the global south? I mean, my late husband has defined 4 laws for the United States. The first one go basically for Glass-Steagall, do exactly what Franklin D. Roosevelt did with the Glass-Steagall law in 1933. That is, you have to protect the commercial banks, and you basically have to tell the investment banks that they have to bring the books in order on their own without taxpayer money. And if they are bankrupt, then they just should declare bankruptcy, but not be maintained by an endless stream of printed money, because the rest of the world is no longer going to finance it. That's part of the significance of the de-dollarization which is going on. And then, you have to have national banks, preferably in every country. And then you have to put the credit generation back under the control of a sovereign government, and put out credit lines for production, for investment in those areas of the economy which, are valid: infrastructure, science, basic research and development, all kinds of industries, agriculture, high technology areas like space, fusion. I mean, it would be so easy to resolve this. And, if the United States would make the decision to, make the shift away from the permanent wars and, feeding these wars with the military-industrial complex, and basically say from now on we will invest both these capacities and credit to be generated through this reform for the reconstruction of the United States, infrastructure, rebuilding the cities, investing in the health system, and education system. It would be so much more beneficial for the United States and the rest of the world that I can only hope that this anniversary will get the thinking people, not only in the United States, but also other parts of the world, to think of the wise words of Lyndon LaRouche and listen to them, as Mexican President Lopez Portillo had already demanded. I think it was in 1998. So now is the time to listen to the wise words of Lyndon LaRouche.
And Helga, I posted this morning on the Daily Update an interview I found with Lyndon LaRouche from April 2003 that was done in Germany, where he talked about his decision to take on the fight against the International Monetary Fund at the point at which Nixon pulled the plug. So we can make that link available also. And I think your point here is that it's time for Americans who haven't yet discovered LaRouche to discover him, because I think people around the world are already realizing that this is how they wish Americans would think. So those are the questions I have. Do you have any final comments?
Yes, please go to the Schiller Institute website and look at the video of the IPC meeting of last Friday. It's an absolute incredible combination of speeches where, some of the best, people in the United States, I would say, basically warned and tried to wake up the public where we are at. Don't miss that video, and distribute it widely, and then do everything you can to participate in the next IPC meeting this coming Friday on 11 o'clock US time, East Coast time, because there we will have a special speaker among several others, namely Scott Ritter, who recently had his home searched and raided by the FBI, and I think he will speak there what this is all about. So do not miss that. This will be an extremely important event, and join the International Peace Coalition, because that is our effort to unite the peace movement before it is too late.
Well, thank you, Helga, for joining us today. And I think I speak for everyone when we thank you for your work, and we'll see you on Friday.
Yes, till Friday.